Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the Time to Talk About podcast. My name is Noble, and we're so excited that you all are joining us and that we are starting season two. So, for our first episode today, we're starting a new series called Time to Talk About Current Events, where basically we want to pick a few stories that cover current events going on in our country and in our world, and just read them and talk about them, basically. So, we're just going to jump right in, and we hope that you guys really like this and at least find it informative. But yeah, so our first article is from CNN, and it's about some of the education changes happening in Florida currently. Okay, so the headline says Florida Board of Education approves new Black history standards that critics call a big step backwards. And by the way, all of these links will be in the description. So essentially, I'm going to try and summarize it. Basically, Florida's education board has approved new set of standards for Black history education, so in public schools. That is basically cutting out a lot of the truth about slavery and the atrocities of the civil rights movement, the history of racism in this country. And Florida's governor, Ron DeSantis, already has a track record doing this. He already changed the AP standards for African American history. There's a lot of things he's done already, but this is the latest one because he believes that we need to stop woke ideology. Anyway, so the new standards require instruction for middle school students to include how slaves developed skills, which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. That is from one of the standards documents. Um, so obviously, a lot of people are very upset about this. A lot of people are outraged because the whole motive behind this is to reduce, basically make slavery seem a lot less than what it was, and especially to make students believe that slavery in some cases had some upsides, even though it wasn't great, which is not true at all. Obviously, I don't think we need to say, but yeah. So Eden, when you first looked at this, what were some of your initial thoughts?
I mean, I had a lot of thoughts. Firstly, I think that it's erasure of history, and erasure of history is so detrimental because um, without a good knowledge of history, like you're bound to repeat it. And I think you and I, and probably everyone else listening to this podcast, is well aware of the atrocities, maybe not the full extent, but at least to a partial extent,
Right.
the atrocities that were committed through the institution of slavery. Um, I think my second comment is more so about the age group of people that this questionable initiative was set forward for. You mentioned that it's primarily going to affect the middle school education system, and I think that that's especially um, unsettling to me
Mm-hmm.
because I think that middle schoolers are at an age where they're very impressionable. Like that is the age where you begin to kind of make your own opinions about the world around you, and that might include past, like things that you learn in history, your kind of maybe political standing, or at least your thoughts about the social aspect of any type of society.
Right.
Um, and this curriculum has a huge potential to influence the way that people of that age think. Um, Thirdly, I think that the whole idea that slaves were taught something or given something to develop themselves through the institution of slavery is such a weird idea to me because it's as if people are trying to justify the atrocity that was slavery,
Mm-hmm.
right?
That's what it
There's
comes
no
off as.
justification that can be done. Yeah, that's exactly what it comes off as. Like, there's no justification that can really be done. It's more so, I mean, even if that was the case, which Okay. I don't think so. But even if that was the case, like it
Yeah.
doesn't erase any of the widespread atrocities that we know about. It doesn't erase it. It doesn't make it any better, and it by no means is grounds for justification. I think that the outlook that people that have been subjugated, like the outlook that they have gained good things from that subjugation is not a way to look at situations at all, because it allows you to trivialize their experiences and the histories and the concerns that people that might be descendants of those that had to go through those atrocities, like those concerns that are put forward, you're also invalidating those concerns as well. Um, for me, I think about like the era of like colonialism in other countries, area of
Hmm.
imperialism,
Yeah.
especially across Africa and Asia. And obviously, some of this did coincide with American slavery in terms of time. Um, I think actually, I know that a huge part of the justification at that time, and even to this day, of what Europeans did in terms of subjugation was that, they were sharing civilization, they were sharing democracy, they were sharing their religion, their way of life, right? But by doing that, they also insinuated that the way that people of color or people living in Africa and Asia, the way that they were doing things was inherently wrong, right? That their culture was not as developed, that their culture was flawed. And the same thing has happened for enslaved people and descendants of enslaved people. And the same thing is happening right now, right? So I think what Florida is doing is really a step towards making certain people's culture and certain people's cultural memory more and more white and slash or Western, instead of preserving the cultural diversity that we have, which is very, very, very dangerous because it trains people, especially at that age, to look at different cultures and different ways of living as flawed or wrong, which is not the case, right? We know
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
so many great things have come out of cultural diversity, right? Without cultural diversity, we probably wouldn't have
This
math, we probably
country.
wouldn't have science, we wouldn't have, yeah, we probably wouldn't have this country, we wouldn't have so many displays of art as well. So um, it's very, very, very strange. But I think that it goes deeper than that. Like, it's not just like an invalidation of culture, it's also like an invalidation of lives. I think that, especially here in America, people see black bodies as being very, very disposable, and this is really just an extension of that. So yeah, for me, it's really troubling. I don't think that it's the right way to go at all, but unfortunately, it is happening. So
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree with everything you said. Like, it is blatant cultural and historical erasure. And I feel like all that we can do as Americans around the country is just to condemn it and stand up and say, hey, this is not right. Because it's like you said, I love that you said that, if we don't study and remember history, we will forget it. And if you forget it, we are bound to repeat it. I wanted to point out to in the article, it does say that obviously they've been making changes to high school curriculums as well. It says that, I'll read this quote: when high school students learn about events such as the 1920 Okeechee massacre, the new rules that require instruction include acts of violence perpetrated against and by African Americans. This massacre is considered the deadliest Election Day violence in U.S. history, and according to several histories of the incident, it started when Moses Norman, a prominent black landowner in the Okeechee, I don't know if I'm even saying that right, Florida community, attempted to cast his ballot and was turned away by white poll workers. They're even in that one piece of history that they're trying to do away with or change, there's so much to unpack there. Because first off, they want to highlight the fact that black people were being violent, even though black people were the ones who were being attacked, right? And most likely they were only trying to fight back. So instead of focusing on the issue, which was voting rights and voting access, they want to turn the attention to what the victims are doing to defend themselves. And then voting rights in general, we know, is already to this day being challenged and is under attack. So to kind of, simplify or maybe even say whitewash this like historical event when it is based on something that is still taking place today is really blatant, frankly. and honestly very scary. Obviously, this is just Florida, so every state is going to do different things, but I'm sure we'll see a lot of states follow suit, which is terrifying at least. Um, I don't know. Do you see anything else that jumped out, at you in the article, or any other thoughts?
I mean, I feel like I have just a few more thoughts.
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, I think that people might not think that certain people might not believe that this is really even that deep. Like they're just I mean, I feel like there's always a risk of people not understanding the depth of a given situation, but it really does have implications past people being uneducated in the context of school, right? Because those that ineducation or that ignorance is going to outline the way that they interact with other people, right? Some pieces of history that I feel like have been effectively erased from education and history, especially when it comes to African Americans, or construed to the extent that they are very, very untrue and they feed people certain lies, um, include like the Tulsa Race Massacre and
That's a big one.
events of that nature.
Yeah.
And I mean, some of those events have been successfully, but unfortunately, rebranded as um, race riots, which I think is very weird because people are looking at retaliation in a way that makes a lot of sense as something that is demonizing, right? Okay, they don't look at it in a way that is demonizing. They look at it in a way that demonizes other people, and I think this
Yeah.
happens on a very large scale,
Right.
right? Um, I just want to point out that in situations like the Tulsa Race Massacre, because several of these happened in U.S. history, the premise was really that African Americans had a whole bunch of um, they had built, lives, businesses, well-being for themselves, right? And other people that oftentimes happen to be white didn't like that, and so they basically came and destroyed it all. That is what it was. And it ended up in a lot of people dying because that is what the people were doing. The white people were killing the black people in these societies because they didn't like the fact that black people were building something for themselves. They wanted to keep black people down. Um, and
Right.
I'm bringing all this up because I think that it has an effect even until now. If you look at a lot of the big stereotypes for black people as a whole,
Yeah.
right? It's that, they are lazy, black people,
Lazy,
they
not
don't like
hardworking,
to be productive. Yeah, not hardworking. They just like to,
don't want to be
but
educated, don't want to go to college, things like that. Yeah.
exactly, but that's not the case at all, right?
Yeah.
Like
Especially
there have
with
been
our
several
generation.
situations. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like there have
Hmm.
been several situations in which black people have literally made business and,
Yeah.
like they've made something for themselves, but
Even in the
white people
past,
have
I should say
continued to,
too.
yeah,
Not
yeah,
just
like
now.
some white people that didn't like it, kept bringing it down over and over and over and over again. And because things like that have been erased from a lot of history books, especially in terms of standard curricula, sorry, like people don't get to know about this, and these stereotypes continue to fester and to grow. And that's very detrimental because it's people that hold these stereotypes so close to their heart that literally commit hate crimes. Like I'm not even gonna mince my words. Like people hold stereotypes so close to their heart and they allow them to guide their actions such that they commit hate crimes. Right? That is obviously not the only reason that people commit hate crimes, but it is a huge part. So when you erase history and make a certain group of people look like they are doing one thing and look like they are not contributing anything to society, when that is not the case, what do you think is going to happen? Right? I think I would like to
Right.
point out that a very similar thing is happening halfway across the world, like in the Israel Palestine conflict.
Mm.
I have heard so many people say very choice things about the Palestinian armed forces, and but from the reading and from the, I guess, self education that I've done on that situation, right?
Right.
I mean, a lot of people that are Palestinian are simply retaliating towards what the bad things that are being thrown onto them in any regard, right? Like that is literally modern day colonization. But because people have allowed these stereotypes of, a certain group of people being a certain type of way, right? Like people continue to view that conflict as Palestinians being inherently violent, and it's like that's not the full picture. You're only giving one side of the picture, and when you continue to do that, you allow people to solidify their wrong, quite frankly, wrong opinions about other people, which leads them to treat them like they're less than human. So it really is an issue, right? It's not just people getting misinformed and moving on with it, right? People learn about this, they don't learn about it in its entirety, and they become ignorant. You can become ignorant. Like you are not always just ignorant by default. They become
Absolutely.
ignorant,
Hmm.
and for middle schoolers, oftentimes it's against their will. So it is an issue. It is an issue that people need to pay attention
Yeah.
to for sure. But I feel like that's all my comments there.
Yeah. I feel like when it comes to things like the Israel Palestine conflict, I think a lot of people are, like you said, they're ignorant. They're just not educated. Either they don't know at all and they're just talking, or they know some, but they're not fully versed, on the situation. We have a lot of ignorance in America, unfortunately, and around the world. And when we have people in control, um, of history education doing things like that, it really only is furthering that ignorance. I mean, even we have to remember too, right, that our history standards as they were, right, the history that you and I and so many American youth learned in school over the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years wasn't even the full picture to begin with anyway, right? A lot of violent, atrocious things that were done to black people, and a lot of civil rights history was left out. They kind of just hit the big things and the highlights, right? Obviously this is a much more severe, erasure. But we have to remember that even things such as Juneteenth. I mean, I think part of the reason why Juneteenth did not become a federal holiday for so long is because many people didn't know about it, and even those that did, it was not important to them. It was not on the forefront of their minds. I know I didn't learn about Juneteenth in school at all. I didn't know what it was. Many people do not. So it's just things like that. And everything you're saying is true. It relates to other situations going around in the world too. Sometimes in America, we're so America centric that we can't even, take the time to learn about other issues in the world. And even when we do, we're kind of haphazard about it. People are not seeing the full picture. People are not fully educating themselves and just making assumptions based on, American biases and American point of view when it's a different country and different issues a lot of times. Um, I did want to highlight too the statement that their Department of Education made. I'll just summarize. Basically, they said that it was developed by a group of 13 educators and academics. It's a rigorous process to develop the standards, and they are sad to see critics discredit their in-depth and comprehensive American history standards. It's basically what they say. I always want in these articles. I always want to make sure to you know highlight both sides of the argument, even if we may not agree. That is their statement. I will say too, the article did highlight that Florida teachers, most of them are not for this. So it's not something that like the Florida Educational Board is just like, okay, this is what we're doing. The teachers like, yes. It says that teachers unions there are pushing back. One of them called it a disservice to students and a big step backwards for a state that has required teaching American history, African American history, since 1994. How can our students ever be equipped for the future if they don't have a full, honest picture of where we've come from? And they go on and on. But that's pretty much, I think, in a nutshell, what we've been saying. And I think that the worst part of it is it's all clearly part of Governor DeSantis's political agenda. He has his anti-woke ideology. That's what he's running on, both for governor and for president. Not that he wants to be a president. And I don't know, just somebody like that. The thought of somebody like that running for the presidency is really like scary. I know we kind of saw glimpses of this with Trump, but I feel like Trump didn't even have the bandwidth or I don't want to say intelligence, but maybe he didn't have the foresight to meddle with you know, school education. Like he was not that forward thinking, you know. Whereas this guy is very smart. He's a career politician, so he knows what he's doing. So, we need to be aware and we need to be ready to vote for sure next year. I mean, we can't, um, emphasize it enough that especially as young people, Generation Z, like this is the first election that a huge chunk of Generation Z will actually be old enough to vote in. So we really got to come out and you know, put our ballot down and make our voices heard in that way. But yeah, is there anything else? Any other thoughts before we move on? I think this is very important. I'm glad we highlighted it. People need to be aware.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all I have, but yeah, people definitely need to be aware of that.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Okay. So the next article was one I found saw on Instagram, and I just thought it was interesting. So the president of Stanford University has announced that he is now resigning after reports found flaws in his research that he had done. It says Mark Tessier Lavigne. I don't know how to pronounce these names. We're just going to call him Mark. He was cleared of accusations of scientific fraud and misconduct, but the review said his work had multiple problems and fell below customary standards of scientific rigor. Okay, so my understanding is that people thought that he was falsifying data. Um, I guess they from their report and their investigation, they found the data was not falsified, but there were still many problems with the article and it was not following the standards, of scientific research. That's basically if we want to highlight one in particular, um one of the reviews refuted a very serious claim involving his work on a 2009 Alzheimer's study. That was subject investigation that found falsified data and that Dr. Mark had covered it up. The panel included that the claims appeared to be mistaken and that there was no evidence of falsified data or that he had engaged in fraud. But they also stated that 2009 study conducted while he was an executive at the biotech company Genentech had multiple problems and fell below the customary standards of scientific rigor. So we get the gist. That's basically what they're saying over and over again. What do you think about this? Obviously, this is very serious because not only is he a career-long researcher and scientist, you are the president of a university, and universities do a lot of research. So when I saw this, I was like, "Wow, okay then." Yeah.
Well, I guess I should kind of start this by saying that by no means am I an expert on scientific research or
Yes.
any scientific field.
Me neither. Disclaimer.
But I will say that um, I am a STEM major, and I try not to be annoying about that, but it's hard. Do we have a superiority complex? Possibly, but
We
that is not
do.
the point of discussion. Uh-oh. But
We
the
do,
point,
but I
the
think it's
point
justified.
is,
But
I don't know. We'll let the people that listen decide that. The point is that um, in my studies, I have had the scientific method be hammered into me time and time and time again, right? And because of that, I feel like I understand that it has a huge importance because science outlines the way that we go about basically everything, right? From direct medicine, direct medical interaction, direct medical development, even into health policy, right? And then health policy can affect other types of policy,
yep.
right?
Hmm.
So the way that the science is done in general, especially health sciences, is very, very, very particular. I I mean, it seems like a couple of people, or at least some entities, think that there was not really that much of a problem with his research, according to this article. But some do think that there was fraud. Um,
Yeah.
so I mean, I guess I applaud the investigation about it
Yeah.
because it's very important that we get rid of misinformation. Medical and scientific misinformation
It's dangerous.
that will finish us.
Yeah.
Like it will finish us
It almost finished us
because
during COVID, honestly. Like the
yeah,
pandemic
it
could have
definitely
ended.
almost
It
finished us
was
during
not
COVID.
great, but it definitely could have been way worse if, the government
Yeah,
and the scientists were not able to combat, and even Fauci and everybody were struggling to combat all the misinformation.
yeah,
But sorry, go ahead.
right. So yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point about COVID because there were a lot of people that were just moving their mouth just to move it. There are a lot of people that were typing websites just because they had an internet connection and a laptop, and it's like y'all do not know what you are talking about. Like, I don't
Hmm.
really know how to say that in a more respectful way. So
Yeah,
take it or leave it.
it's true.
But you know, and it's very dangerous because a lot of people were influenced by that, by a lot of
Hmm.
claims that were very baseless and didn't have um real science behind it. Um, Fraud in terms of scientific studies is something that should be taken very, very, very seriously, in my
Yeah.
opinion. I think the prime example is of that one guy that was in the Lancet. You probably know who I'm talking about. That one guy that made the claim that vaccines cause autism.
Uh huh.
We have not seen peace since that day. Like, we have
Hmm.
not seen peace at all since that day because to
Yeah.
this day, because of that
People still
article and
believe
because
that.
of the
Hmm.
fraud, right? Because of the fraud that happened in that article, people still believe it, and it causes so many problems. Every single time y'all hear about measles in the news, that's
Yeah.
that's the issue. Like,
Yeah.
that's the issue because people now think that vaccines cause autism, even though it's a very, very, very baseless claim. Even people close to you might
Yeah.
have some of those opinions. And
Hmm.
so I feel like you have to learn how to like talk to them about it in a way that might make sense. But again, I'm not a scientific expert, so I can't. I mean, I probably don't have the expertise to be able
Yeah.
to like tell them, instruct other people. But I guess you can kind of do your part.
Yeah.
My issue with that is that fraud likely did play a role in that um in that whole vaccines causing autism situation, right? But
Yeah.
even beyond that, it was a very poor study design, right? The sample size was incredibly small. Some of the people, not all the people, but some of the people, kids, right? Because it was all kids as well, right? So
Hmm.
that you can't generalize that. But some of them had autism
Yeah.
prior to receiving this MMR vaccine.
Yeah.
Every single person in the study came from one institution that was aimed at helping kids. So once again, they were all kids, which is flawed. That was
Yeah.
aimed at helping kids, or at least instructing kids that had autism in one way or another. And also, I'm not sure if it was the researcher themselves or if it was someone on the team, but apparently, someone on that team, very well might have been that researcher himself, was paid off by a lawyer that was supposed to like prove a case in the law of court that a pharmaceutical company had caused autism. So he
Oh, I
paid a
didn't know that.
researcher to get data for him. Yeah. So
Mm.
it was a very, very, very poorly designed
Yes.
study.
And he did
And
fall, to be
you
clear,
know,
if people are not familiar with it, he did falsify data too. It wasn't just like bad design. Like there was actual false data. Like, he changed the number so it looked like there was correlation. He changed the number so it looked like there were higher rates of certain things. So, and he did get his license revoked as a result too. It's not like he wasn't dealt with, and it's not like, the medical governance did not move quickly, but it's like it doesn't matter how fast you move when it comes to that type of misinformation. Sorry, the damage is done. Frankly,
yeah, I mean, I mean, you're right. Like, I feel like you said basically everything else I have to say,
yeah,
except that, like, I think that people don't realize um, how long of a process the scientific method actually is in any type of study, and it's also very, very continuous. Like, you don't prove anything in science. That doesn't happen. Nothing is proven in science. There is only evidence for and evidence against things, right? So we might say scientifically proven, which, like, there is a huge amount of evidence for, and that is significant, right? But, being able to put an end to a given study, right, or a given theory is not really something that happens in science. And some people might take that to mean like, oh, that means we don't know anything. But in my opinion, I feel like it means we know a lot, right? It means we know what looks like, or at least works in some ways, and we know
Right.
what we need to work on, right? And
Hmm.
it's continuous. So we learn more and more and more and more and more. Also, you have to remember that, scientific studies have to go through peer reviews by independent boards, like,
Yes.
I mean, that guy got it published in any magazine, I don't want to say a random magazine, but he got it, published in a scientific journal.
Yeah.
So maybe there's question there. But before science is really put on the table, like a huge part of it, especially what's going to affect people through medication or something like that, it does go through a lot of people. So if people feel like, oh, like the board is like doing too much by looking at his work and asking about, fraud and stuff, no, that's the way that the scientific method works. And without it, it would probably hurt people, especially because he works for a biotech company. So the products that his research backed might have come into contact with actual people, So I don't know. That's just my opinion. I think that science is a good thing and we need to understand that.
Yeah, the standards of medical and scientific research, they have to be upheld regardless. And it doesn't matter who you are. This man's probably very rich, being the president of Stanford is an Ivy, right? If not, it's
Mm-mm.
one of the
No, it's like at
universities
the
we
same
think
level, but
of
it's not an
as an
Ivy.
Ivy. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
just because you're the president of
Yeah.
Stanford doesn't mean that, those standards don't apply to you. I mean, I will give him respect for, voluntarily stepping down, not being forced. Well, maybe he was forced behind the scenes, but on paper, he voluntarily steps down. It says that he did say that he's sure that people will continue to discuss the report and the conclusions for the time being and investigate. So he doesn't want people to debate about his ability to continue to lead a university. So that's why he's stepping aside. So the end of next month, he will step down, but he will continue to serve as a tenured professor of biology at the school, which is interesting. I mean, it says he is a neuroscientist. He's published more than 220 papers, primarily on the cause and treatment of degenerative brain diseases. So he's a very smart guy, but you know, doesn't mean that the laws and the regulations and the standards don't apply to you. And then this is funny to me. They have appointed a professor of European studies to take over interim, which is funny to me. It's like they were just like, let's just stay away from all the scientific people because the optics of it, we're just gonna go get somebody from humanities and call it a day. But yeah, that is pretty much that one. I think this is a reminder to us too that any research we read online, assuming you're not reading it straight from the medical or scientific journal, you're reading any article, even like a CNN or the Times, that is a reputable source, right? We should fact check, right? If you're reading from one reputable source, like the New York Times, look that thing up and get another reputable source just to compare to make sure the information is correct. If it's not a, respected news organization, reputable source, look for that same information from other ones or the actual journals. We do need to get into the habit. I think as humanity, we're just used to taking what we read and running with it. We click the first two Google results and call it a day. So this is a reminder that whatever we read, we do need to actually, if we're going to actually believe it, we do need to actually fact check. Sometimes those sites like the Yahoo Newses and the types that may also still be reputable, but they like the grabby headlines that's like, this new study says that if you eat this, you'll lose a lot of weight, stuff like that, right? Sometimes they're not, it's not even that they're lying, is that they're taking a few nuggets from a study and then drawing a conclusion. And sometimes that's not the thing. So it's so easy to grab the headline and run with it. So I think this is just a reminder that we gotta not be anxious, but be aware when it comes to medical information and be in the habit of at least checking for another source to make sure that information, is verifiable. I think we'll leave that one for now. So the last article we have um, is about the actors' strike and the ongoing writers' strike. So I'm sure many people have heard about this. According to the New York Times article here, this is Hollywood's first industry-wide shutdown in more than 60 years. And I've been reading a lot about this because I just find it very interesting. And obviously, I have shows that I love to watch that obviously are being affected at this time. Filming has stopped and things. So I think it's important that we take time to discuss this so we can understand what they're fighting for, how we can even support, understand what the point of this is and hope for a better outcome. So I'm actually going to slide to the Wikipedia real quick. I don't have it here. Oh, okay. I will say I read on the Wikipedia site, but I will open it up in a sec. That the strike started in mid-July. I believe it's the 14th of July. And this is the actor strike. So one thing that's important to understand, right, is that there are writers and then there are actors, right? So there's a writers guild, which is the union for the writers, people who write your favorite shows, right? Actors most of the time are just doing what has been written, right? Producers too are executing what's written, although a lot of producers are involved in the writing. So writers don't get paid. I know a lot of times, which is why I want to talk about this. A lot of times when we think of actors, we think of celebrity actors, the ones that are very well known, that are making a lot of money, right? The Zendayas, the why can't I think of any other actor? The Margot Robbies, right? The Jennifer Aniston's. We think of them, the A-listers that are rich, obviously, and actors just doesn't include that, right? And then writers, on the other hand, most writers are not celebrities. They're just everyday people. And so they're not making that much money to begin with. Let me open up the Wikipedia too while we're here. Yes, okay, so it started July 14th. The writers the actors union is called SAG-AFTRA. And then the writers one is called Writers Guild of America, WGA. So WGA started in March, right? Basically, they are protesting for better wages first and foremost, especially when it comes to residuals. So, and you can interrupt me at any time if you want to jump in and say something, because I just kind of want to lay out like a general overview of what's happening. So the main thing they're fighting for right now, both actors and writers, are residuals. So when streaming started becoming a thing, right? They writers and actors, they actually had like I don't know if it was a full-on strike, but they had basically they had a sort of protest slash set on discussion with these executives and such, because streaming changes the way we watch TV shows, right? Traditionally, when all TV was on cable, residuals are basically the payments that everyone involved in a TV show gets when the show is aired, reran, goes to another network and it's rerun. So for the lifetime of the show, it's extra payments people get on top of their initial payment, right? Because writers and also crew, people who hold the cameras, the mics, all those people are also part of the writers union. They also don't get paid very much, so they're also striking. Obviously they get an actual payment, their actual salary at the time, and then that's pretty much it, right? Most of the time, from what most of them say, that is only going to last them a few months. So that's why most writers and even actors are jumping from show to show, movie to movie, right? Because unless you are a A-list actor at the top of the sheet, you're probably not getting a whole lot of money to just live on, right? So they get their initial payment, and then everybody is supposed to get residual payments that come based on when the show is running, in perpetuity. When streaming happened, because if you think about traditional TV, right, a show will air when it's new, right, the whole season, and then it might rerun in a year or two or something, or on a different network, maybe once or twice, and then that's really it, right? And if once a show is no longer airing on TV, you can't really find it anywhere, right? Sometimes you can find it on YouTube, but it's not going to be full quality. People aren't going to watch it like they watch a traditional TV show, most likely, right? So the residuals and stuff were a little more fair back then because everything was in control, right? All the TV shows were in one place. So people were just getting residuals. It was a simpler model. When streaming started, streaming introduces the concept of people watching whatever they want when they want, right? So these shows now and movies are not just going to be watched for maybe 1, 2, 5, 10 more years and then boom, no longer available. Now they're watched for as long as the streamer decides to put it on there, right? So at the time, writers and actors negotiated a deal that would be a new residuals module for streaming so that they would be able to still get residuals in a way, even though, with streaming, people are watching on demand. So it totally changes the model. Now they are saying, and they're fighting because that model they feel it's not good in to keep it simple, right? They don't feel like, first off, it's not enough money to sustain them. A lot of actors have come out and writers have come out and actually shared their recent residuals checks, and it'll be like $1 here, $5 here. Like, it's not really stuff you can live on, right? And with a lot of the changes that have been happening in streaming as of late, they just feel that they deserve more, and they do, because they should be able to live comfortably, right? And many of them not. A lot of writers, especially in crew, are struggling to pay their rent, to get groceries, simple stuff. Like, these are not people who are balling, right? And obviously, you may see famous actors joining the strikes, but most of them are just there to support. They may not financially be struggling, but they're there to support because that's the point of a union. But essentially, that is the background on to break it down very simply. So let me go back to the article here. To hit some of the main points. Obviously, pay is a big thing. Streaming has gotten more popular, especially during the pandemic. Another thing, a lot of screenwriters and actors are demanding health insurance. So obviously, we know a lot of jobs in this day and age, come with health insurance. A lot don't, but at least higher paid jobs normally come with health insurance. Many of them still do not. I guess it depends on the studio and the executives, whoever's in charge. But obviously, healthcare really should be a fundamental human right. And the fact that it isn't in this day and age in America is really something else. But so that's another thing that many of them are fighting for. Many are fighting for fair wages. Many are fighting for healthcare as well, and really for just the residual module to be updated to be, accurate and match what the current stream model is. Yeah, so that's an overview. I've been rambling a bit, so I'll let you chime in with your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you did a good job of summarizing it. I feel like I'm not the most educated on this topic, so I'm going to refrain from talking too much, but I do have a couple of opinions. I think I'm going to start with the last thing you said about the health insurance. Um, for me, health insurance being attached to jobs works for the people that have it, but I don't know. For me, like the way that I look at everything is like two-sided, right? So a presence of one thing is a lack of its opposite, right? So for the people that have health insurance, that's been connected to their jobs, that's good for them, right? Especially if it's a good plan, right? But I'm just thinking about how so many people are like maybe unemployed or don't have health insurance that are connected to jobs. So are you telling me that the fact that they don't work or the fact that they aren't working in a specific sector or the same amount, that means they're not worthy of healthcare? I don't know. I feel like that might be a little bit of a stretch for me to say, but it is like a little bit weird to me. I know that a lot of people have concerns about health insurance in general, being like free and accessible to everyone. But for me personally, my personal opinion is that I think to a certain extent, or to the full extent, it should be a right. Because here in America, you always hear people talking about like we have, the right to life, liberty, property, prosperity,
Mm,
and everything in between. Well, a right to healthcare is a right to life, right?
yeah.
Because if you're living and you're not living in good health, what kind of way is that to live? What type of a way is that to live? You know what I
Mm,
mean? And obviously, there's people. out there that maybe have certain conditions that are, other than that, still having good lives. So I can't speak over all those people, but what I can say is that people die without health insurance.
Hmm.
It's true. People will not go to the hospital, to the clinic, to urgent care, to anything because they don't have health insurance. So I think that that is something that affects many, many, many more Americans than like just actors and writers. But I think like a lot of people view going into Hollywood in that capacity as like their dream, but maybe they might not understand that, like, at least at first, it's highly unlikely that you'll be like one of the big shots in Hollywood. So you'll probably have to deal with a situation just
Yeah.
like that, right? You might have to deal with a situation where you don't have health insurance and you thought that that would never be an issue,
Yeah.
because you made it that far, you know.
But that's why they're
So
striking,
that's
if
my
I can say, because that's not acceptable.
yeah,
Like, you should not have to be
at
an
all.
A-lister making loads of money to live comfortably as an actor or writer. You shouldn't. Like, there can be the rich ones and then the ones that just make standard income. But it seems like that don't really exist. It's either you're rich or you're super poor, which is the unfortunate problem right now.
Right, So, I mean, for me, if I had a friend or an acquaintance that wanted to go into acting or writing for Hollywood or for any type of show, I would always encourage them because that's something they want to do, right?
Hmm.
But I would also hope that they are kind of, aware of,
Yeah.
you know, what's going on in its entirety, but then also maybe this health insurance thing. But also, I think like the health insurance things in general, like that's something that we probably most of us will probably have to deal with at one point or another. Maybe not most
Yeah.
of us, but a huge amount of people will have to deal with at one point or another, right? That's not something that's like specific to acting, but it's still kind of, riveting to hear because a lot of
Yeah.
people, like I said, make something like that their dream, right? That's something they really want to do. It means a lot to them. And you tell me that they can't have health care because they're not
Yeah.
Margot Robbie, like that does not make any type of sense to me.
Yeah.
Um, and then as for the premise of the pay and the change in the job scene, I think
Actually, sorry.
changes in the workplace. Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Before we go to that, can I say something about the healthcare stuff? Yeah, I think healthcare is a big problem in this country. Healthcare insurance, especially, there's a much bigger conversation to be had there that we probably should talk about. Frankly, I'm the one of the people that believe we should have Medicare for all or something like that. That the government has a health plan for everybody that is mostly subsidized by the government. But insurance companies are very greedy and they don't usually work in the best interest of consumers. So it's also important to have competition. A lot of people just want to have Medicare for all and then that's it. But we can't just have the government healthcare plan and that's it because other companies may be willing to provide better healthcare, better features and stuff, right? Better perks on their healthcare plan, right? And these corporations, especially, I think why the actors and the writers are really focusing on it right now is because the corporations they're striking against are NBC Universal, Discovery, Warner Brothers, who own HBO Max, Apple, Amazon, who owns Prime Video. Like these are companies that have gajillions of dollars. So I think that's why they're really demanding it because like they can't afford to. They're not a startup or a mom and pop shop or a family small business that probably can't afford to get insurance for all their 10 or 15 employees, right? Like these are corporations. So it is very important, but I think we always have, in my opinion, I think we always have to, I feel like everybody who has a job with a major corporation should have access to health insurance. They need to have that option in case the if we even get a federal one, we may never get a government Medicare for all with the way things are going. But in case that plan does not cover all their needs, maybe they have a disability or a condition that another plan will fit better. It's always good for them to have that option. Unfortunately, it seems that right now it's like if you're working a low income job or you only making a certain amount, you get that, and those who don't. But it is very important. I agree, and we should have something so that even unemployed people get healthcare insurance because many other countries have had that forever. But sorry, let me let you go ahead with the next point too about the pay.
No, you're good. I think you brought up some good points. Now about everything else, I think that the workplace is constantly changing,
Hmm.
right? Why do you think that a lot of companies, whether big or small, have to lay off huge amounts of people? You know, I think the same thing happened like even in like the tech world, for example,
Hmm.
right? Like at the time of COVID, they hired a whole bunch of new people, and now they're laying off a whole bunch of huge people, a whole huge like a huge number of people. Sorry.
Yeah.
Um, so changes in the workplace happen, right? I think the issue is that people that sit comfortably, maybe have a high position, maybe have high pay, they don't think about how those changes are going to affect the people that they supervise, right? Um, because sometimes it doesn't really affect them, right? The people that are at the very top of NBC and etc., right? They are absolutely not being affected by streaming. I mean, their money might be a little bit, right? But they're still probably going to make a good amount of money off of people using their platforms. So it's not really a thing where they are like their livelihood is being um attacked. And I think that strikes are very, very good for that. Like strikes have been effective in the past. Like they're always going to eat, in my opinion. They're always going to eat because if you don't have people working for you, then what are you going to get done? Are you going to act yourself? I guarantee you, some of these CEOs probably cannot act to save a day in their life, right? So in
Definitely.
this way, right,
Yeah.
they probably can't, right? Like because this workplace is changing, and that might be out of a lot of people's control, but you know, that's neither here nor there. People feel like their talent and their hard work, is going underappreciated, and I feel
Yeah.
like that is an issue. Yes, it is the hard reality of life,
Yeah.
but
It shouldn't be.
that does not mean, yeah, like that does not mean that you shouldn't do anything to make it easier, like on those people. Again,
Yeah.
I'm not really educated on this topic, so I don't really know exactly the full extent of all these issues. And I also don't necessarily know exactly how like this whole thing could be changed because I like streaming. Noble, you like streaming. Streaming is the way that
Hmm.
people watch TV. You
It's the
know,
future.
like
Yeah.
people, right? People do not do cable as much as they used to anymore. They just
Hmm.
don't. So there's not like a surefire way to fix that, right?
Yeah.
But one thing I do know for sure is that people that are working should not be going without money. We talked
Yeah.
about this on the
Yeah.
minimum wage podcast. We talked about it then as well. People that are working in any capacity should not be going unpaid. For me, I am a very, very, very staunch opponent of unpaid internships because
Hmm.
you are literally using like teenagers and like 20-year-olds for free labor.
Yeah.
That's illegal. Like you need to be paying people.
Yeah.
So, I don't, to be honest with you, I don't even know exactly how this could be fixed, but I do know that those people should be getting paid. I mean, I have
Hmm.
an idea because let's be so for real, corporate greed is definitely playing a role in this. And if that was relaxed just even a little bit, we might
Yeah.
not even be in this situation, right? I think the issue is that people look at problems and they don't look for solutions. When people are looking comfortably, they see the problems that other people have, they realize that it doesn't apply to themselves, and they don't look for solutions.
Yeah. That's true.
That's the issue because
Hmm.
people are going hungry. When you told me about your New York trip and you told me about that one restaurant that you went to, and there was a whole bunch of Broadway actors that
Hmm.
would literally come and like perform, in the restaurant, and they would turn around and start serving meals because they were servers. They were
Yeah.
servers because they didn't really have acting opportunities, so they weren't really
Yeah.
getting money. That's also an issue, right?
And that
I don't
is
know.
that was the concept. So I went to this diner that was called Stardust Diner, I believe, and that's the concept. So basically, most of the waiters and waitresses are actually people trying to make it on Broadway. A lot of them have gone to school, maybe some of them haven't, but a lot of them have bills to pay. And they're actually trying to get on Broadway, but obviously they need money in the meantime to get by. So they're also being waitresses and waiters. But the idea is you come and, enjoy the music and stuff. And then in addition to tips and your food that you pay for, they do ask for money if you're willing to donate to help support them. So it's kind of one of those things that, like, it's nice. It's really cool that we have, but it's sad that we need it. But that is the reality for many people in, the Hollywood space. I do want to highlight a few points here real quick in the article. So first, a little more about the residuals. It says both actors and screenwriters have demanded increased residual payments, which are a type of royalty from streaming services. Streaming series typically have far fewer episodes than television series did. And it used to be that if a television series was a hit, actors and writers could count on a long stream of regular residual checks. Streaming has changed the system in a way that they say has hurt them. Both groups also want aggressive guardrails around the use of artificial intelligence to preserve jobs. So two things here. So first, that was one thing I forgot to mention about streaming. Streaming really changes the way we consume content, right? If you go look at streaming shows, especially your favorite ones, most of them on average have anywhere from 7, 8 to maybe max like 20 episodes. Where in the past, when everything was on cable TV, most shows would go on for 20, 25, 30, maybe even 35 episodes, like a bunch of episodes. But because streaming is all about binging, right? And the model where you just throw the content and people come in and come out when they want, right? It's more financially beneficial for these companies to make short seasons and get people hooked. So they keep paying the subscription, and then when they feel like it, come out with another season or maybe cancel it. It's more cost effective for them. But as a result, there's less episodes for people to get residuals from. And because there isn't like a regular, like, okay, this is the season that it's airing, and then this is the season it's rerunning, because there isn't like a set schedule anymore. People can come and watch shows whenever they want. It makes the residual checks way less and sort of unstable. People can't live on that as they should be able to. So that was one point there. AI is another big thing a lot of people are being vocal about, because obviously we all know about ChatGPT and these generative AI services. These technologies are very smart. So a lot of companies are already, and studios are already playing with the idea of using AI to write TV shows and movies. Obviously, the generative AI is still not there that it's going to come out with something excellent, but these studios are already exploring. And so writers basically want guidelines set so that their jobs are not phased out, and that they can, still be utilized as well, which is very important, because AI, it probably will get better, but right now it's not going to create content that is as good, And even companies like OpenAI, who are making ChatGPT and such, these companies, most of them don't really want everything to be taken over by AI. They want us to integrate AI into our lives and find ways we can use it to be helpful. It's not really meant to take over everything. But obviously, a computer writing a show is way cheaper than hiring a team of writers too. So these companies are looking at that, which is another thing too that we should be aware of. Just want to see if I can highlight any other things. I mean, we have to remember too, this will affect all of us in one way or another, at least if you consume media content. Many popular shows have already stopped filming. A lot of TV shows, like late night shows, daytime talk shows, have already stopped, right? Shows like Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert have stopped filming since March. And you have to think it's not just about the Jimmy Fallons and the Kelly Clarksons and the Stephen Colberts of the world, right? They're making money, right? They're the star. They will probably be okay. They'll probably have savings at least, right? But you have to think about also not just the writers, but the crew, the cast, all the people who make a show happen. Those people are living paycheck to paycheck. So right now they're struggling. And what a lot of people feel that these companies are doing right now is that they're just trying to hold on. Basically, no company has agreed to sit down at the table and be like, let's negotiate. All the companies are being like, oh, these people are striking and they're making a big deal and we don't want to hear it, basically. So none of them are open. And what a lot of people feel like right now, what they're doing is that they are just holding on, or they're staying put as long as they can until people start getting evicted, not being able to pay their bills. And obviously we can't let it get to that point, but obviously these corporations have so much money, it's not the end of the world for them if they have a few more months that they don't have writers. A lot of them too are doing what they're called scabbing, which is when they get other writers or other people who are either not part of unions or people who are just willing to like sort of go against the strike and cross the union lines, what they call it, to go and work anyway. So a lot of shows, ABC, I was reading the other day, has already hired some scabbers, basically writers who don't want to help with the strike, essentially, to start writing, which is another thing that's very harmful because it really hurts the power of a strike. So there's a lot going on. A lot of shows have already stopped filming for their upcoming seasons. Disney's CEO came out and basically said that he thinks everything they're asking for is unreasonable, and they're basically, you know, doing Hollywood a disservice by demanding for all these things. So that's the type of people we're dealing with, unfortunately. But yeah, I think people get the idea, but it's something we should definitely stay tuned to, and keep an eye out, because your favorite shows and movies may be affected. And another thing too is that it also stops promotion, right, of certain shows and movies. So even if a movie has already been filmed or a TV show has already been filmed before the strike, um, the actors and the writers who are in the unions are not allowed to promote it in the same way. So if you notice, like for example, Barbie that just came out, if you noticed, most of the promotion has been done by the music label who made the sound, who is in charge of the soundtrack, right? And a little bit by the studios. The actors didn't really go and do a bunch of interviews or anything because of the strikes. So it does affect things. But yeah, this is an issue that we should definitely keep an eye on and be aware of. Even if you don't watch that content, right? It's just a matter of wanting people to have what is fair and to be able to live comfortably, which really is not that much to ask, especially when these people are making multi-million-dollar uh, paychecks a year. But yeah, so actor strike, writer strike, very important. All these issues, we wanted to start this series because we want to remind everyone to, it's important to stay informed, right? Keep up with news and know what's going on in our country, in our world. So that's part of being a good citizen. So um, yeah, it's so important. Eden, any just closing thoughts? This is our last article, so any closing thoughts or final remarks?
I mean, I think everything you said is true. It's really important that we are um, up to date on what's going on. I know sometimes looking at the news can be slightly like just saddening because there are a lot of crazy stuff going on around us at this time. So I feel like it's not something that like you need to be going into a bad mental state just to like look at.
Right.
But I do think that part of being a good citizen of the country, your country, the world as a whole, is paying attention to the things that happen around you because you are not the only person that exists, right? I think
Yeah.
we all know that, but we might not all really internalize it to the extent that we should.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm
Especially in
really glad that
America.
we talk about this. Yeah.
Yeah. I think our culture is very individualistic. So people have the attitude of, well, if it doesn't affect me, I don't have to care. But at a basic human level, right, we should at least have that sense of compassion for other people, I would think. But yeah. So that brings us to the end of this episode. I know this was a little more, I feel like it was a little more academic in the way we did it than maybe our episodes last season, but we hope you guys enjoy it and find it informational. Please let us know in the comments, in the little response box that's going to be on Spotify and such. Let us know what you think about this episode and if we should do more like this. And please let us know too if you like seeing us, if you like having video. We're debating on whether do we want to keep it up or not. So please let us know your thoughts on that. Some feedback would be great. All these article links will be in the description, as well as links to all our social media accounts. So please do follow us and stay tuned for more content. We're going to continue dropping once a month. That seems to be the best schedule for us. So please subscribe and stay tuned. But in the meantime, stay safe and stay healthy, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.